I remember I was very young, 20, 21, when Malcolm came to speak at Oxford. The mood was, the image of him projected by the press was, as our comrade from the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung said, a preacher of hate. That was what all the newspapers said. Why has he been invited? A lot of controversy. And yet it was the only debate that year that the BBC wanted to televise. And it's thanks to them that we still have images of that debate. Had they not done it, people would, well, we wouldn't have forgotten, but other people might have forgotten. And I remember, I've written about this, so apologies to those of you who've read it before. When Malcolm came into the green room equivalent of the Oxford Union, and I was wearing my native Pakistani clothes and introduced to him, and he gave me a hug and said, another Muslim brother. And I said, Malcolm, I am a brother, but I'm not a believer, and I want you to know that. I never have been. From a very young age, I've never believed in religion. And he said, you know something? I'm learning this more and more as I travel around the Muslim world. That I meet lots of people like you who, when I greet them and say this, they say, yes, but we are not believers. And I said, the thing is, for us, we live in that world, we grew up in that world, and thinking that we were of Muslim origins or Muslim birth or Muslims was not a big priority. There were many other things to think about. That was true then. It's not so true now, by the way. And we had a talk. So this was before the speech. Then he sat next to me on the bench before he went up to speak. And he made the most amazing speech that union had heard. Moving, powerful, intellectually light years ahead of all the people participating in that debate, including those on his own side. And he was educated. By God, he knew how to educate people. And I can still see in my mind's eye that audience, 99.9% young white kids, 99.9%, just completely hypnotized because they had no idea of the world that he was describing. And when the Conservative Member of Parliament, Humphrey Buckley, I still remember him, made fun in a very Oxford way, saying, why you called X? Why not Y? Why not Z? A might have been better, not understanding the reason. It wasn't, he was joking, but he really didn't know. And Malcolm's reply, which explained slavery in 5 minutes to the 600 people who had packed, was just amazing. We all learned from it. Now, once the debate was, he came back and sat next to me and said, was that okay? And I said, just look at them, Malcolm. The whole place had given him a standing ovation. Very unusual, by the way, in that body. So afterwards we went, I walked him back to his hotel, and we talked and talked. And at the end of it, and you know about many things, his travels to the Muslim world, what was really going on in that world, etc., the United States of America. When we were going to get up, we hugged and we shook hands, and I said, Malcolm, it's been really great, you know, and a real privilege, and I hope we meet again soon. And he said, I'm not sure. Do you come to the States often? I said, no. He said, I don't know whether we will meet again. And it was such a startling remark that I just sat down again. I said, what do you mean? He said, look, they're going to kill me pretty soon. And at first I thought, what the hell is going on? You know, who is this guy? I mean, I've heard him, but what on earth is he talking about? I mean, why should... And he said, I said, who's going to kill you, Malcolm? He said, the FBI, the nation, who I've broken from, and who are very angry with me for that break. And I said, well, no one else in the world of Islam takes the nation seriously, as you know full well, Malcolm, because they don't recognize them as Muslims, because Islam, if it's one thing, it's universal. It never has a closed membership by ethnicity or race or anything. It's universal. He said, yeah, now I know that, but they don't. And so I said, and then he said, the FBI or the nation or a mixture of both. And I said, but why would they do it now? And he said, did you hear that speech? I said, yeah. He said, you know, for you it's normal what I said. I said, no, it's not normal, but you know, it's pretty amazing. He said, no, but you didn't understand, which you would if you were living in the United States, that I made it very clear that I was in favor of blacks and whites and any other progressives uniting against the system. And I said I was not opposed to mixed marriages. He said this creates shockwaves on both sides, because the white establishment doesn't like black leaders who try and unite everyone, and people like the nation don't like it either for their own different reasons, and their interests are converging. So, you know, we embraced again, and I walked and met a lot of friends the next day and said, everyone in the city was discussing the speech, because we were on the edge of a radical upheaval. No one knew it, but there were signs that radicalism was in the air. This was part of it, Malcolm's speech. It fed into all that. And the next day, discussing with a group of friends, mainly socialists, I said, this is what he said last night to me. And they said, they're going to kill him? Come on. And 3 months later, I picked up The Guardian, and on the front page, Malcolm X assassinated. I tell you honestly, a group of us met that day quite spontaneously in a place we used to meet, and we wept. We didn't say anything to each other. At first, we wept. And it taught us, that single incident taught us a great deal about the history of the United States of America. And we read, and we became more engaged, and we understood what the new movements that were springing up for voter registration was. And then, after a few years had passed, and Martin Luther King declared in public that it was a shock to him, he said, when he discovered that the greatest purveyor of violence in the world is my own country, something Malcolm had been saying for many years. And when Martin Luther King was considering standing as an alternative presidential candidate with Dr. Spock as his running mate, as some of you will remember, to challenge the power structure, he was killed and executed. And then after these two giants came the Black Panthers. Systematic repression against them. Systematic. We now know it. All the stuff is out there. They were infiltrated, killed. Young men and women, African Americans who had grown up listening to their leaders, to Malcolm, to Stokely, to Martin Luther King, to others not so well known, and had decided to do something to form a party. And they were repressed. And so black history in this country became a major discipline, and for us too, abroad. We learned a great deal. I remember most of the stuff I read on the Civil War and on the lynchings, and the fact that the Ku Klux Klan was, like it or not, the largest political movement in the United States after the Civil War. The largest, with millions of members and sympathizers. That we learned. And we learned how deep this went in the American psyche in different ways. And so when I read a book by Michelle Alexander today, in which she describes the incarceration of African Americans, and in which she says that the number of African Americans either incarcerated or going through the judicial system, parole or whatever, today, she did this about 4 years ago, so it's 4 years ago, that the number of African Americans being treated in this way is virtually the same as the number of slaves there were before the Civil War. That figure haunts me. It haunts me when I think about it, because it means that on some levels there has not been much progress, despite all the talk and despite having a mixed-race president in power. And all the talk we heard after Obama's victory through his colleagues that we are now in a post-racial society. And I asked myself, what the hell are they talking about? I mean, I don't even live there and I know that this isn't true. So, the important thing, I think, in paying tribute and honoring the memory of Malcolm is to remember his ideas, what these ideas were, what he stood for in a certain way in times that were more difficult than our times today. Remembering those ideas and taking them forward. And that's why I said the great movement which sprang up in this city, in other cities in the United States a few weeks ago, was a cause for a great deal of hope. It went one step, for me, beyond Occupy. Spontaneously, in different parts of the city, people, young people, black and white, and Latinos, and others, came out and spontaneously marched in different ways so they couldn't be isolated one by one, and brought the city to a halt against the crimes being committed by young people. And to them we pay tribute. And to them, Malcolm would have paid more than tribute. He would have seen the completion of his work, the fact that things don't go away, that you don't gain without struggle. And that ultimately, it is the struggle of the ordinary people, the common people, that will be decisive in transforming this country.